is a genre. There is a group of people who are not children, and they're not really adults, but they like to be, and they think they are, but they really need the reassurance that their peers can bring. That's an incredible work. And that opened up and made way for this sudden explosion, which we've seen reiterated recently with young adults. But somewhere between The Outsiders and about 1990 something, children's reading started to go downhill. And there is one writer to whom we should all be eternally grateful, and that is J.K. Rowling, for writing Harry Potter, because having gone to, I believe, 25 publishers, she finally had it accepted, and the book was published in a quite low-key manner. And then children started to recommend it to other children. There was no big publicity campaign, there was no mass marketing going on initially, except kids who read it recommended it to their friends, and it suddenly exploded. And that single book brought reading back into the forefront of children's lives. And whatever your views on witchcraft or wizards or the way the series developed or whatever, I think we have to be grateful to Joan Rowling for putting that book in and kick-starting again children's love of reading.
Thank you. I couldn't put down the book, but my other PhD friend recommended it to me because at the time I was doing my grad school, and it was like a phenomenal, even in the adult world.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's why they put it out with an adult cover, so that adults didn't mind being seen reading.
Yeah. Thank you, Janet.
Sorry, excuse me real quick. Speakers, would you mind speaking a little bit louder for us since we are doing some recordings?
All right.
Okay.
Well, hello everyone. I want to make a confession that I hated to read when I was a child. Excuse me. It's not, but I loved words, and I loved language, and I loved communicating. But I didn't like to sit inside and read, because generally it's something you do alone, inside, and I saw it as very boring. I saw it as very lonely. I wanted to be outside playing, so sorry. That's my personal history. However, I did, as I said, my father is a professor of literature. My mother is a teacher of language. My sister was a librarian. 3 of my sisters are visual artists, and so they all appreciate communication. So to me, reading is about communication. So whether it's a book, which is, a very serious thing, but it doesn't have to be a full book. So for me, music was very important as a child. I grew up in the United States in the 60s, 70s, where many famous people were writing songs, singing songs. Beatles, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell. These people, to me, really touched me with their language, not just some of the melodies were pretty simple and not very interesting, but the language and the joy and the playfulness of using words, and the beauty and the truth and the justice, all of it was combined in a very unusual way that really reached me. So for me, that's my kind of first thing is singer-songwriters, particularly Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, and Beatles, and Woody Guthrie touched me in particular. And I think the real first books, I didn't really like reading until I was at university, and then I loved it, and I couldn't stop. And I always did really well in school, but I wouldn't choose to read until university. Then I couldn't stop, and I haven't stopped since, and that was 30 years ago. This is my 50th year of living, and I'm publishing a book to celebrate my 50th year. So I've really loved reading for 30 years now. And maybe one of the things that brought me to Hong Kong from the United States was Chinese poetry. I love Chinese poetry, and I love how China, in its history, has really respected language. And they see the power that good writing can bring to the country, to the world, to the person. And sometimes that's a problem politically if you have writers who are writing certain things, but most of the time it was a good thing. And it was a strong thing and an important thing. And I like, J.K. Rowling was a normal person, any of us working at the coffee shop writing the book. I love that it's a normal person doing this. And anyway, so Chinese poetry, I took several Chinese literature classes at university in translation. Sorry, I'm a very bad Chinese student too. I've tried to learn it many times. I've lived in Hong Kong 25 years and I'm sorry, I apologize. It's not very respectful, so excuse me. And then, I don't know, I really struggled with this question of 3 books, and I was like, well, whose world? I mean, my world is very different than your world, and I work at Oxfam. Well, actually, I just resigned from Oxfam. Yesterday was my last day. I'm moving out of Hong Kong next month for a while anyway, and so for me, if you ask me as a kind of an activist person, I even though my mother and father are literature and language people, I hated reading, so I'm kind of a rebel at heart. So when you asked me to choose 3, I refused. I guess for me, maybe the first children's book was The Diary of Anne Frank. It really affected me, and I went to see her house, and my mother is German, and my personal history was seen in her book. My mother, as a child living through World War II, is from Stuttgart in southern Germany, which was heavily bombed. I mean, almost nothing of Stuttgart was left, and she needed to leave her city. So, I mean, anyway, I very much related to that book, and to me it's, one of the most important books in my world.
I'm sure it's actually influencing a lot of readers' way of seeing history as well. So thank you very much, Madeline. I actually also some of the things that you said really echo with me as well. I don't necessarily think about readings only about books. Poetry, song, lyrics, they're all things that I enjoy very much. Or a lot of times books are adapted into movies. And a lot of times when I enjoy a book, I'll go look at the movies and various, like that kind of different adaptation. And song lyrics are particularly influential to me. In fact, my favorite Chinese poetry genre, songqi, it's actually song lyrics during the Song Dynasty.